In the warm evening in the June of 2009, Air France Flight 447 was flying from Rio de Janeiro to Paris. The modern Airbus A330, packed with the latest technology and 228 people, was flown by three trained pilots. The captain, Marc Dubois, was 58 years old. He had over 11,000 flight hours, including 1,700 on the Airbus A330. First officer David Robert, 37 years old. Around 6,500 flight hours, 4,500 of which were on the A330. Relief First Officer Pierre-Cédric Bonan, 32 years old. About 2,900 total hours, with just 800 on the A330. At 35,000 feet, above the dark Atlantic, everything seemed routine until it wasn't. At 2 a.m., Captain Marc Dubois, with over 11,000 flight hours, left the cockpit to rest, which is a standard procedure on long-haul flights to make sure that the crew is well prepared and rested for the duration of the flight. What the captain didn't know was that in just 9 minutes, the aircraft would be in a freefall. At 2:10 a.m., the plane flew into a patch of high-altitude storm clouds. The least experienced pilot, Pierre-Cédric, was in control. Minutes after flying into these storm clouds, a small but critical part of the plane, called a pitot tube, froze over. These tubes are tiny sensors on the outside of the plane that measure how fast the plane is moving. They can be thought of a system like a car speedometer. If it stops working, you don't know if you're speeding up or slowing down. When the pitot tubes froze over, the system lost reliable airspeed data. The autopilot, which depends on that information, suddenly shut off. So, the pilots had to fly the aircraft manually, at night, in turbulence, and at cruising altitude. As a response to this, Bonan's first instinct was to pull back on the controls, lifting the airplane's nose up. It felt right. He likely thought the plane was dropping too fast. But at that altitude, pulling up made the plane lose speed and stall, which means the wings couldn't generate enough lift to keep the aircraft flying. To make things worse, the computer started to send confusing warnings all at once. Stall alarms, altitude changes, and speed inconsistencies. The pilots had no clear idea what was real and what was not. This was enough reason to call the most experienced member of the cockpit team back to consult. So, they did. Dubois walked into chaos. When he returned, the communication was fragmented. Nobody clearly stated that they were in a stall. Bonan just didn't want to challenge his seniors. Robert hesitated to take full control. The altitude was falling, the angle of attack was increasing, and the captain, unaware of the early inputs, struggled to assess what had gone wrong. He and they believed it was just a minor system hiccup. They expected it to pass. For more than 3 minutes, the plane was in a full stall, but they continued with the original plan, thinking that they were still trying to get out of turbulence normally, despite all the warnings blaring on the dashboard. Yet Dubois never ordered a stall recovery. He kept trying to understand rather than act. Astonishingly, no one said the cursed word, stall, until 20 seconds before the impact. There were no survivors. As very fancy, sophisticated apes, us humans have specific ways of functioning that served us well throughout our evolution. But every survival strategy has its own trade-offs. What can be useful in one scenario can lead to unimaginable destruction in the other. Me, you, your friends, partner, neighbor, your dog, well, maybe not your dog, all have this psychological phenomenon called a cognitive bias. There are hundreds of different types of them. If you're even remotely interested in psychology or philosophy, you probably know what I'm talking about. Logical fallacies are a subcategory of cognitive biases. To take us back to our topic, these biases affect each of us constantly on a daily basis. Think about a scenario where you helped a friend finish their part in a group assignment at the very last minute. When the next assignment rolls around, you'll likely feel less pressure to finish your part as soon as possible. Well, because the last time you overdid your part anyway. Your mind will come up with all sorts of rationalizations to soothe your conscience, begging you to feel more responsible. This is called moral licensing, where your past moral behavior potentially makes you more likely to do immoral or unethical things without feeling bad. Essentially, people feel that a prior good deed gives them the license to act in a more questionable or selfish way afterward, with no changes in ethics or morals. Training can make us a bit more resistant towards acting with such logical errors, but it can also paradoxically make us more susceptible to resisting when someone points out that we're making this error, because Well, I know about that bias. There's no way I'm falling for that trap. I regret to inform you that you'd indeed be falling right into it. And that trap is called the meta bias, though. The name has nothing to do with the ethically questionable tech giant. In meta bias, one believes that simply knowing about the bias protects them from its influence, but they are just as susceptible as anyone else, sometimes even more so, because they overestimate their objectivity. All three pilots in charge of Flight 447 fell into these cognitive traps on the night of the tragedy. Ironically, the very kind of traps that highly trained pilots like them may be more susceptible to. Their expertise may have given them a false sense of security, making them more vulnerable to biases they believed themselves immune to. These were action bias, the tendency to take action impulsively in a crisis, even when doing nothing or waiting could be smarter. The first officer immediately pulled back on the scythe stick after autopilot disengagement, assuming the aircraft was descending too fast. But there was no need to pull up the aircraft, which was already at cruising altitude. This unnecessary input caused the aircraft to enter a stall, and Bonin kept pulling back throughout the stall sequence. Confirmation bias. Focusing only on data that supports what you think is happening and ignoring the signs that contradict it. Bonin seemed to believe that the aircraft is in a high-speed dive, even when the instruments and stall alarms said otherwise. Despite the stall warning sounding 75 times, he continued pulling up, reinforcing his false belief. Authority gradient bias. When lower-ranking crew members hesitate to question or override a higher-ranking officer, even if they're wrong. When Dubois returned, Bonin and Robert didn't want to state that they were in a stall. Normalcy bias. Assuming that things are normal, even when there's strong evidence that they're not. A refusal to recognize a serious change, potentially perceiving the threat in it and finding comfort in the denial of it. Despite the aircraft losing altitude rapidly, they acted as if it was just a routine upset. The pilots treated the situation like a temporary autopilot failure and kept applying standard turbulence procedures. They ignored blaring alarms constantly. The accident was unfathomably tragic and preventable. A study from a university in Dublin found that 72% of the cases involved a single dominant cognitive bias, and those cases overwhelmingly ended in accidents, not minor incidents. So, what should we do? Are the pilots even aware of this fact? Luckily, I know a pilot with 4,000 hours under the belt, so let's hear from the expert himself. So, welcome to this humble interview, Mr. Karajabe. How are you doing today?
Good. Still alive, as I'm always saying.
So the first question is, how many hours of experience do you have flying? What kind of aircraft?
Honestly, I don't know the numbers, but most likely I should have around different 25, 30 different types of aircraft that I already flown. But I don't know the exact number at the moment. When it comes to the flight hours, I should have around real flight time around 4,000 hours, and with the simulator hours, which is still really valuable experience in aviation world, I should have around 6,000 hours of experience of flying. Let's say you want to become a pilot and you started to your flight training, and at the end of the flight training, at the end of more or less 2 years, you might get around 200 hours when you are becoming airline ready. So you can just compare the experience that I have.
What kind of training did you receive when it comes to psychological hazards in the cockpit? How much are you taught about the cognitive biases?
During the flight training, we have a training phase where we are calling it ATPL theory phase, which is airline transport pilot license theory training. During this training, you need to pass 14 different subjects. One of these subjects is human performance. Human performance, most of the time, is really unique lesson or subject, let's say, because you are trying to understand yourself. The main part of this human performance is psychological training. So we are trying to understand how we will be behaving or how our perception may differ in different scenarios or situations, such as emergency conditions. And main idea is trying to understand, trying to accept those possible threats, possible errors, and trying to overcome those errors during these scenarios. And cognitive bias is one of these threats for the safety of the aviation.
Do you think the given training and the resources are enough?
In the basic level, yes, it's quite enough. But of course, it depends on the people, it depends on the pilot candidate as well, because there are like a plethora of information. So if you would like to learn, if you would like to dig into these every single subject, there are plenty of information, plenty of sources are available. So you can just go through all those resources and you can just train yourself and educate yourself. As a pilot, we would like to understand the information that mostly we will be using it in our basic life or everyday life. At the end, we will be using this information, and every single day we will be learning, we will be improving and evolving ourselves. So it's like a continuous story, continuous learning environment. And still, every single hours in aviation is a unique experience because every single day is different, and every single hours you are learning, you are improving yourself and enhancing your knowledge as well.
Have you ever encountered a scenario where a cognitive bias almost caused an issue during a flight?
You can talk about in the cognitive bias in different perspective in the aviation. Like there are confirmation bias, there are ATC bias, there are continuation bias, because it might be a psychological effect on the mission as well. We were doing one of the basic training, and during this basic training, we have different flight phases. And one of the flight phases, we are calling it as a navigation phase. Simply, you have a chart and you are just flying fairly good weather conditions. You have like some pre-flight preparations that you are preparing from point to point where you would like to go, which direction we will be flying, how long will it take, how much fuel do we need, etc. And then during the flight, simply we are just trying to fly exactly the points that we would like to fly. In one of these training flights, we were flying with one of my student pilot candidates, and we planned 2 hours of navigation flight, and we're supposed to fly one point to another point like for 2 hours. And the first part of the flight was quite okay. Like the first half hour, 45 minutes was without any problem. And one of the checkpoints, because we are filling it up some navigation logs as well, which is pre-flight calculation, like which heading I will be flying, how long will it take, etc. This information. And in one of the waypoint, my student pilot just read the wrong number. Like instead of like one line, he just read the wrong line. And instead of we should be flying like let's say 19-ish heading, we start to turn heading of 270-ish. So we were making like 90 degrees of mistakes. But at the beginning, my candidate pilot didn't recognize it. And as a flight instructor, we didn't tell anything because this is one of the learning moments as well. The first 5 minutes, he's trying to look outside and trying to match what he needs to see and what he's seeing at the outside. After 10 minutes, he starts to see something a little bit unusual. I was aware of the positioning and I was aware of the situation as well. But he saw, let's say, one wind turbine, like wind turbine farm. And he checked his map and he said that, oh, okay, we should not see those wind turbines. Then he tried to confirm that he's not making a mistake, that there was like a bias at that moment. And he thought that like, yeah, maybe they just put the wind turbines just fresh out of like maybe like the last week, let's say. His brain was playing a little trick to him. And he wanted to believe the position where he wanted to be. But we were 5 miles out of the position. And it took around 15 to 20 minutes of flight time for him to recognize that we are just going in the wrong direction. Then he started to question himself, oh, maybe we are not in the correct position. Then he started to understand that, he started to look for the references, and I helped him, and I told him that, like, we just made a mistake of 90 degrees of nearly mistakes, which was a simple mistake. Just he read out the wrong number, and we flew like 15 minutes of wrong direction.
To divert from the first section of the interview, I'd like to ask you another question that is completely unrelated. What are your thoughts on the concept of AI in the cockpit?
For me, it's a unique and niche area, the AI business and AI agents. The technology is still not 100% proven. That's why I'm a little bit suspicious. And when it comes to the aviation, it's quite hard to use any kind of technologies which is not 100% proven. There's a really popular saying in the aviation that most of the rules are written by blood. So somebody tried to create some new technological improvement, But then sometimes things are not going as it's expected. And then at the end of the day, they see that, oh, it's not working the same way that they want to be. So they simply create a new rules to, oh, okay, we should not do it this way. Maybe in the near future, it might be a case that where we can use the AI agents in the cockpit, but I don't think that in the very close future, we are going to use the AIs in the cockpits.
And from your perspective, what advantages do you think AI co-pilots could bring to flight operations?
After some experience, flying is like every day, another day at the office. So there are lots of new challenges, but you know what you are going to do and how things are going to work. But when it comes to the emergency procedures, emergency situations, the story is completely changing because you don't know what is going to happen. You don't know how much time you will have it. And sometimes you will start to get the warnings in the cockpit, like this warning, that warning, this warning, and there will be like tons of information is coming to you. Of course, this is another procedure in our decision-making process, we are naming it. Simply, we need to check the facts, like what are the conditions and what information do I have, and we need to check the options, we need to make the risk assessment, then we need to choose one of the options, and then we need to assess and evaluate our decisions all the time. But simply, sometimes you have like only 30 seconds to process all those information in your brain. Those moments, I think AI may help because, of course, when you start to hear like warnings over here and there, your body starts to be creating adrenaline rush and you start to have sometimes tunneling of the vision that you will be focusing some of the information. And maybe you need to see the other information as well to come up with the correct decision, why the emergency is happening or how I can just solve the emergency. And AI can help us to give those data in a more compact and quick way, let's say.
Imagine you're playing chess, and before you move, a coach leans in and says, if you do that, you'll lose your queen in 2 turns. That coach didn't just react, he predicted the consequences of your decision. That's called predictive outcome modeling in artificial intelligence. It's when an AI system looks at your current situation, runs as many possible futures in its head, and picks out the most likely outcomes. Kinda like Doctor Strange in Marvel comics. Now, let's put that in a cockpit. In this scenario, a pilot's landing gear warning light goes off. Is it real? A glitch? AI doesn't just sound the alarm. It compares the aircraft speed, flap positions, past failure patterns, the current runway conditions, etc. And then it says, based on insert number similar patterns, if you land like this, you may insert outcome, suggest checking insert system data before descent. This isn't guesswork. It's data-driven foresight. Predictive AI models act like unemotional advisors. They don't panic. They don't assume. They run probabilities and surface risks humans might miss in real time, with objective data directly fed into the system itself by the computers in the aircraft. They answer the question, if we keep going like this, what's likely to happen? And that can be the difference between a safe landing and a serious incident. Let's focus specifically on Airbus for security reasons for this bit. As far as the public is aware, the company had been investing in AI technologies for a while. Airbus is deploying over 600 generative AI use cases across the company. As an example, a virtual assistant that retrieves the precise torque settings for procedures from technical manuals in seconds. This has great pilot support potential. It replaces the reliance on memory. For example, did I remember the alternate checklist? Which directly counters confirmation bias with objective document retrieval and also acts like a cognitive offloader. As a side note, working memory load is a critical limit all of us have that causes problems if our current situation has way too many external inputs. Such systems reduce the working memory load, freeing mental capacity for decision making. This is more than just ChatGPT for engineers. Airbus is using generative AI to create co-pilot level advisory tools. There are many such systems that are now either recently being utilized or in the development process. I'll add a little table here so you can check out which of those systems could potentially help with matching troubling cases while I conclude and say my farewell. Do you think the future is near where AI can actually replace the pilots in a cockpit?
I would like to answer this question with another question. Would you be comfortable or would you like to fly in an aircraft where the AI is the only only agent in the control instead of pilots. Would you like to fly at the moment or in the next 10 years, let's say?
Right now, I would not want to. But and then maybe in the next 10 years, considering the speed at which AI is evolving.
The answer is maybe. So, and there is no place in aviation a maybe. So we need to make sure that there will be 100% for sure the safety standards will be achieved.
Long story short, AI can't feel panic. It doesn't get tired, it doesn't guess, but it also doesn't improvise like a skilled pilot. The point is to combine strengths. Airbus collaborates with ESA and global regulators to ensure AI systems are transparent to humans, controllable, and robust against errors. Autonomy is not independent, says Airbus. Instead, it's adaptive collaboration.